something out for the.
Oh, really?
And,
I didn't know that would ever happen.
well, that's thanks to me, by the way. Because he wants to know when. I don't know when the ropes come back. That's what it's like. I don't know. Where is that? Hey, so ask him. You told me last week or something to the college for this week. What's going on? So he said, I don't know. My uncle got some time in the summer. This is reference. I want to tell you something. We need to like people who stuff why send college for their parents. We better find out when they're going on forward. It's reference. That is. What if I looked down and asked him, what was your uncle's name? The other one, when did he die? He said, well, and he said sometime in the summer. But which funeral home is it? So somewhere on Steele. So he checked both the websites. Give me his name. Is it Joseph Cass? He died on June something. But basically, it was tough civil. We could have done with this 5 weeks ago. We could have done with this.
Zok to Gemara. So yesterday we learned. So
I guess we'll take out for it.
That in the times of Noach, the Bnei Noach, they had 3 requirements, and therefore there were 3 requirements that the animals had to have to get admitted into the Teva. They could not be treifos. They had to be able to give birth to other children. So because of that, they had to be young, which actually we didn't learn yesterday. We'll learn that today. And the third thing is they had to have their Rosh Evar. Okay, and that's why the Goyim, when they bring a carbon, they stick to the same rules that their grandfather stuck to when they were bringing carbonas to the Rebbeinu Shloim, and therefore they need 3 days to prepare their animals, and that's why our Mishnah says that for 3 days in advance you're not allowed to do business with the Goy. So Zok to Gemara. Zok to Gemara. Now that we determined that you could learn from now that v'hashta nafkalei me'itach. Now that we know from itach that the animals that Noach brought on the teva couldn't be treifos. L'chayos Zara lomali. What do we learn from l'chayos Zara, which the Gemara originally wanted to use to exclude treifos? Zok Gemara imeitach. If it would only say me'itach to eliminate treifos, havamina letavsa ba'alma. The reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted pairs of animals is so that they should be able to keep each other company, but not to reproduce. Vafilu zakein, vafilu sris, even an older animal or an animal that they knew that Noach knew wouldn't be able to reproduce. That they had to be young animals that were capable of reproducing. When we say 3 days, the mission for 3 days you're not allowed to do business with the goyim. Does that mean hein v'idein means 2 plus the actual day of the chaga? As Rashi says, hein v'idein is a total of shloisha. V'lahavalahu el shnei yomim kodim. Oidilma hein beloy edein, which means shloisha levat ha'ed. So that is the question. Is it 2 plus 1? So 3 days including the Yom Tov, or is it 3 days plus the Yom Tov, the 3 days that precede the Yom Tov? Zok Gemara Toshma. Rabbi Shmuel Omer shloisha lefneim u'shloisha lacharein os. Rabbi Shmuel said 3 before and 3 after. The Brisa. Zok Gemara Isol Kedaitach Hein v'idein. If you're going to learn that the 3 include the day of the Yom Tov itself, Rabbi Shmuel Yomi Deim Chashav Lu Meikara v'Chashav Lu Lebesayf. That the day of the Yom Tov itself is considered part of the first 3, how could it also be considered part of the second 3? Zok Gemara Aidi de Tana Shloisha Lefneim Tana Nami Shloisha La'acharein. But it's not really 3 and 3; it's really 3 and 2. So it's really 3 days, including the day of the Yom Tov. And when Shmuel says Shloisha La'acharein, it really means just an additional 2 days. But the Brisa, the Tana of Brisa, presents it with a parallel language. So we still have our sofek. Is it 3 before and 3 after plus 1, which is a total of 7, or is it a total of 5? Tashma. The Amar Tachlifa bar Abdimai Amar Shmuel. Yom Echad L'diver Rabbi Shmuel LaOlam Oser. Now, this is a very interesting Gemara because this was subject to the censor. Yom Echad is referring to every Sunday in the Christian religion. So let's look at the Aleph in the Tzionim. The first Yoshan is Yom Noitri. The Tevis Yom is Meyuseres. Velesa Rashi Chsavat in the old Exisvayad. So Yom Noitri, the Christian holiday, the Divi Rabbi Shmuel LaOlam Oser. Now let's look at Rashi because there's a censor there as well. Yom Echad, the Divi Rabbi Shmuel LaOlam Oser. Here's Rashi over here. And let's look at the Hey in the Tzionim, and they add a whole bunch of words over here. Yom Noitri, HaHoylech B'Ta'usoi Shel Oisei Ha'ish. Those people who follow the mistake of Christianity, Tetziva Lahem Lasos Lahem Yom Eid Be'aluf B'Shabbos. Yoshke made that Sunday should be the day of rest, which actually was not Yoshke. It was actually, I think, the second pope after Yoshke changed it to Sunday. So now we can go back in Rashi.
This is here of the Sunday, the sun, onward, the obvious.
So for sure it would be usher every week, but it's more than that. It would be Gimel Yomim Lifnei Yom Aleph, Gimel La'acharav Harei Kol HaShabbos Kula. In other words, with Christians, you wouldn't be allowed to do business, period, full stop. Because if every Sunday is the Yom Tov and you have to keep 3 days before and 3 days after, there goes your week. Well, the Divrei Rabbi Shmuel LaOlam Oser, according to Rabbi Shmuel, who holds it's not only 3 days before, but also 3 days after. Come to Chosh, you can never ever do business with a Christian. He says here,
He says here that there were several ancient nations that worshiped the sun, either as a primary god or as a pantheon. Among these were the Egyptians, the Indians, both Asian and American.
Okay, I don't know where he gets it from, because if you look at the Hagoyis for Tzionim, they say beferish. Ha-hoylech b'ta'usoi shel oisoyish. That means Yoshke.
He gets it from Miri. He says, the Miri states ambiguously that the reference is not to Christians.
Okay, so that's the Miri, but the Rashi seems to say otherwise. Yeah, I hear. So there's a discussion of who it's referring to. But whatever it is, if the Yom Tov of these groups are every Sunday, then you'll never be able to do business with them, is what Rabbi Shmuel said. But frank to Gemara, if what we're saying is that 3 days before and the 3 days after really only means 3 days before, including the Yom Tov, and only 2 days after, which is a total of 5 days, so then why does Shmuel say it's all 7 days according to them? Wednesday and Thursday would be mutter, because Sunday is the epicenter. Then you have Monday and Tuesday. What are the 2 extra days? But Wednesday and Thursday would be mutter. So what do you mean? What does it mean when Shmuel said that according to Rabbi Shmuel it would be Aser all week? Zaktamar Eina Chanami. Alibudi Rabbi Shmuel, according to Rabbi Shmuel, who says that it's Sai before and Sai after you're not allowed to do business, Loi Kamaboy the Hain below Yitayin. There surely, found in Rabbi Shmuel must be that the 3 days are in addition to the actual Yom Tov. Ki Kamaboy, the whole Shiloh that we ever had in our Gemara was only ever Aliba de Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, who holds it just 3 days before, what do they mean? Do they mean 2 days before plus the day of the Yom Tov itself, or is it a full 3 days before? And for that, we don't have a raya right now. Omer Ravina Toshma. So Ravina suggests maybe we do have a raya. The Elohein Ideyan Shal Oived Oivdegechab. These are the Yom Tovim of the Goyim. Kalanda, I believe Kalanda is the precursor to Kratzmach. I highly recommend, if you want to understand the history of Kratzmach, but from a Jewish perspective, there's a Rabbi Kellerman who has a shiur on Kratzmach on YouTube, and it's a fascinating shiur, and he describes how Christianity wasn't popular enough, it wasn't taken off enough, and they weren't growing, so they tried to incorporate all of the pagan, wild, crazy holidays. Kalanda was a day, we're going to get a little bit into it, where it was a total precus oil. they would grab women in the street and be honest them. Women knew they couldn't go out on the street on those days. It was total chaos. That was a very popular holiday. So the Christians folded that into Kratzmich as well. I'm sorry? Even worse than that. You're right. There's Kalandra, there's Saturnia, there's Kartasim. So these are the holidays. And he explained what these holidays were and how they were incorporated into Christianity. So Zok to Gemara, these are the this is the Brisa says. The Amrab Chanan Bayrova, Kalanda is Ches Yomim Achar Tkufa. So Rashi says, when is this Tkufa? This is the Tkufa that begins the winter. Let's have a look. Ches Yomim Lufnei Tkufa. So let's just look at the Viter. Let's read it inside Viter. Kalanda is Ches Yomim Achar Tkufa, and Satrunya is Shmoyne Yomim Lufnei Tkufa. V'simonech Achar V'kedem Tartoni. Achar means after we're referring to after the Tkufa, and the Kedem is referring to before the Tkufa. So let's just see what this means. Dr. Rashi, Ches Yom Lufnei Tkufa. Lufnei Tkufa is Tevis. So Tevis is, I guess, where the winter comes in. Haviyidein Kol Shemoina. So there's 8 days before the end of the Tkufa. V'simonech, and you simon to know who says what. The Loitema Kalanda is Lufnei Tkufa, and Satlanaya is La'achat Tkufa. I'm not sure why it's important for me to know when these Goyish holidays are. I guess you need to know when to avoid doing business with them. Is Achar V'kedem Tartani. Achar Ksiv Bereisha. You see how it says Achar is first. Usually Kedem should be first, and then Achar. But Achar is first to tell us Maslisanami Ha'ed the La'achat Tkufa Tana Bereisha. The Yom Tov of Kalandra, which in fact is before the Tkufa, is the Yom Tov that the Brisa mentions first. So that's how you know that Kalandra is after the Tkufa and Shetrunia is before the Tkufa. Zok Gemara V'sol Kedaita Hein V'idein. If you hold that the 3 days include the 8 days, so then if it's a 1 day Yom Tov, it's 3 inclusive of that 1 day. But if it's an 8 day Yom Tov, so then it's 8 plus 2. It should be Hein V'idein Asara Hava. It should be 10 days. So why does it say 8 days? It should say 10 days. Zokt Rashi, Asar Yom Hava. I'm sorry. Right. That's why I want to see Rashi. If you're going to say it means 8 plus 3, it's not 8 plus 3. Asar Yom Hava. Why did it say 3 days? Asara boy lemisni. It should have said 10 days. Me'achar the kaim alon the shmoyne yomim moishich yemei 8. So once we're saying that it's 3 days before that you have to keep, and the Yom Tov is 8 days, it should really be a total of 10 days. Because let's not forget, according to the Pshat, that when it says 3 days, we're talking about including the Yom Tov itself, right? 3 days includes the Yom Tov itself. So if the Yom Tov is 8 days, then there it should say 10 days. If on a 1 day Yom Tov, we say it's 3 days, so then on an 8 day Yom Tov, we should say it's 10 days. Because we're not talking about just the days that precede the Yom Tov or just the Yom Tov. We're referring to the whole group of time together. So if the Yom Tov is 8 days, then she should have said 10 days. No, that we know. These Yom Tovim were 8 days by the way. So in our Mishnah, we were talking about a 1 day Yom Tov. What did the Tanakhama say? 3 days, because the time that you're restricted from doing business with them includes 2 days plus the actual Yom Tov. So if it's an 8 day Yom Tov, then it should be 2 days plus the actual Yom Tov. It should have been 8 days. So therefore, it must be that the Brisa that talks about the Yom Tov of Kalanda is speaking only about the Yom Tov. And besides that, there's an extra 3 days. So the kasha boils down to very, very simply. When we're talking about the restriction, when we describe the restriction, are we describing the extra restriction in addition to the actual days? Or when we describe the restriction, are we talking about the totally restricted time, including the day of the Yom Tov? If you hold that when the Mishnah is describing the restriction, it also includes the day of the Yom Tov itself, so then 8 days is not accurate. The accurate number would be 10 days. But if you hold that when we're describing the restriction, we're only talking about the restriction, and when we're talking about the Yom Tov, we're only talking about the Yom Tov, so then they're two separate things, and the 8 days make sense in this brisa. But if you say that the way the Rabbanan speak is about the full days that are restricted, including both the extra days of restriction plus the day of the Yom Tov, then it should have said 10 days. He saw that the Chain V'Dayan Asar Hava. Zokt Gemara, no. Tana Hulei Kalanda Chad Yoimahu Chashuv. The Tana considers all of Kalanda like 1 day. So therefore, yes, he could say 8 days because he's saying 8 days and he's only referring to the Yom Tov because in the Tana's mind, the Tana is looking at the Yom Tov as one unit. Amar Ravashi, Tashma. So we're trying again to bring a raya to the Shaila. When the Rabbanan said 3, is it 3 inclusive of the Yom Tov, or is it 3 in addition to the Yom Tov? Toshma, lifnei idein shel oivdei kechavim. Before the Yom Tovim of oivdei kechavim, shloisha yom, 3 days. Zogt the Gemara, v'sol kadayt chein v'idein, if the 3 days include the Yom Tov itself, listnei idein shel oivdei kechavim shloisha yom. It should say idein shel oivdei kechavim shloisha yom. Zogt Rashi, listnei idein shel oivdei kechavim shloisha yomim lifnei. I'm sorry. It should say shloisha yom is the added iser. So again, tashma lifnei idein shel oivdei kechavim is shloisha yom. The Yisol Kedai Chen V'Idein, it should just say Idein Shel Oivdei Kechavim Shlosh Yom. Why does it say Lifnei? It's not before. The whole period of time that's restricted is 3 days. Why does it stick in the word Lifnei? V'chitema. And if you're going to tell me that the reason why the Tana the Brisa is stuck in the word Lifnei is Haidei Ketani Lifnei Idein is only Lim'ute La'achar Idein, to express to us that the restrictions are only the days prior to the Yom Tov, but not after, but not to tell us that it's 3 plus the actual Yom Tov. The word Lefnei is only there to tell us that the restrictions are only prior to the Yom Tov, but not post the Yom Tov. The Brisa could have said something else. Listening Edem Shel Oivdei Kechavim Gimel Yomim Lifneim, and then I would have known that it includes the Yom Tov, but it's the 2 days before the Yom Tov. Why did it have to say Lifnei Yedein El Shema Mina Hein V'Lo Yedein Shema Mina? As Rashi says, Ella Midolai Idker B'Mes Nisan. Let's look at the Zion. Midolai Idker B'Mes Nisan. La'ed. Midolai Idker B'Mes Nisan Lesser La'ed Kalal. Since the Mishnah doesn't mention anything about answering the 8 itself, it's only talking about the days. Shema Mina Kol Hanach Gimel the Katani B'Mes Nisan Aleph Neikol. The 3 days listed in our Mishnah are 3 days prior to the day of the Yom Tov itself. The Ideyan Memela Mishtama the Kol Shkein Aser. If we're answering business 3 days before the Yom Tov, we don't have to expressly state that the day of the Yom Tov is Aser. That goes without even saying. The hein below hidein katan. So it must be that the lashon habraysa that says lifnei hidein is separating out the days before bedavka. That tells us that the 3 days do not include the day of the Yom Tov itself. So the Gemara is poshet the shaila. Say according to Rabbi Shmuel, say according to the Rabbanon, lifnei hidein means 3 full days in addition to the actual day of the Yom Tov. Shema Mina. Iboilahu. What is the reason why you're not allowed to do business with the Goyim before their day of Avoda Zara? Mishum Harvacha. Is it Mishum Harvacha? Which Rashi explains. The Ravach va'ozel u'moidel avodas kechavim. You're igniting his passion to his Avoda Zara, and he's very excited. Where does it say in the Torah you can't let a Goy be excited over his Avoda Zara? So Rashi, it boils down to one violation. It says V'shem Elohim Acherim Lo Yishama Apicha. The name of the Avoda Zara shouldn't be discussed and talked about due to you. So if you're going to give the guy an opportunity to feel excitement over his avodah zarah, it's in a way a violation of lo yisham al picha. You're causing a buzz around the avodah zarah. Or maybe the reason is completely different. It's mishum lifnei iver leisit michshol, and that means if you're selling a guy an animal that he's then going to go and be makrav avodah zarah, it's lifnei iver leisit michshol. Let's see Rashi. The lifnei iver the maz bin loy behema. You're selling him an animal. If you remember right at the beginning of the Masechta, we were discussing what is prohibited, any business or only selling animals. So it's mashma here that even Rashi is saying it's only to sell them an animal that they would use for a carbon. A guy is also not allowed to do takruba avodah zarah. The he achas misheva mitzvahs bedalad mises b'sanhedrin. It's one of the 7 mises. Correct, Rashi, didn't we just learn that since the goyim didn't keep the Sheva mitzvahs, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Sheva mitzvahs away from them? Unida amaron amad v'tiron. So then why is there a lift either? A guy is allowed to do avodah zarah. Miu al yavru al yodecha. Even though they might no longer have the prohibition, you shouldn't put yourself into a scenario where you're enabling them to do this. Sharei asidin hein litnes adin al she'ein mekaymin oisam. Even though they don't have that aver anymore, the Sheva mitzvahs were taken away from them, but we learned they're also still going to get punished for the fact that they rejected it. Even though they don't get schar, because that was really the only impact of them losing Sheva mitzvahs, is they don't get schar for it, but they will still be punished for violating it. And therefore, Ka'avar Yisrael Mishum Lufnei Iver Loisitin Michshol. Okay, so Zok to Gemara. I don't think it's a deraisa of Lufnei Iver, but it's an issue. L'may nafkamina. What's the difference if it's usher to do business with them because of Lufnei Iver or because of Harvacha? So it's very simple. The Islay Behema L'didei. What if the guy already has an animal that he could bring for the carbon? By you selling him an animal, you are not enabling him. If it's Harvacha, he's still all excited that he bought maybe a better animal. He's so excited, he'll talk about the Getchka and he'll be thankful to the Getchka. It'll still make the buzz. But he he has anyway. Very good job. The Gemara is going to get it. How direct an enabler do you have to be over the flavor? That's what we're going to discuss now. But I just want to take a step back for a second. The word, if you touch the pasuk, the lifnei iver l'shita michshol, the way I would touch it is, don't physically put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. Now, normally, everywhere in the Torah where we have the mitzvah of its literal understanding, its literal translation, and then with a drasha you can say it also applies to someone enabling somebody else to do an aveir. But the Rambam, when he talks about the issue of the iver, he mentions that it's also to enable someone to do an aveir, and the Rambam doesn't even mention the literal iser that you're not allowed to put a block in front of a blind man, which doesn't make any sense because that's the main iser. How did the Rambam know that that's not even what the Torah is talking about by lifnei iver? So I believe the Meshech Chachma has a go'onish pshat. We find often when the Torah says v'yoreisim elakecha, the Gemara darshans don't say I didn't mean it because it's impossible to prove. It's totally in what's your heart. V'yoreisim elakecha, Hashem knows what you're thinking. By the pasuk of lifnei iver l'sid mishol, it says lifnei iver l'sid mishol v'yoreisim elakecha, right? And Rashi says there, don't give a guy bad advice. And you'll say, I didn't mean to give bad advice. I thought this stock was going to go up. I told him to buy this stock. Had I known it was going to go down, I would have never told him to, right? So there's no way for anybody around you to prove that what you're doing is bad. So, Dr. Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what you're thinking. Why would it say in reference to the lav of lifnei iver if it literally means to put a stumbling block? That's something that you can't deny. You put a stumbling block. So from the fact that the Torah says after the lav of a lifnei iver, it must be that its primary target is giving bad advice and enabling an avera and not putting a stumbling block in the middle. I'm not sure if this qualifies as simply pshat or not.
I don't know. Why don't we ask this kasha for every mitzvah, for every lav? Like ayin tachas ayin. Why don't we, we don't say, well, how do you know you don't do it literally? There are many mitzvahs that are
We do
just
ask how we know you don't do it literally. The Gemara
what?
brings Sukkim to prove that it's not literal.
Yeah, so here also they brought a pasuk here
Oh,
also.
no, but the kasha
It's,
isn't why doesn't it also mean not literally? The kasha, why does it only mean not literally? Why doesn't the Rambam even mention that there's actually an isser to put a stumbling block in front of an Iver?
there probably
It's on
is.
the list.
There probably is.
No, the Rambam doesn't even mention that. The Rambam says the only issue of the Iver is giving someone bad advice and enabling an Aveir. He doesn't even mention the main push of shot. He doesn't. The Rambam did not mention the simply shot of the isser. He totally ignores that. If Rambam would say this is the main isser, but we learn from there also that you're not allowed to give bad H's, that would be very characteristic of the Rambam. But that if you totally ignore the base isser, that's out of character.
Maybe, but I just don't think that this rises to the level of kasha because this is how we read psukim.
We always
Uh,
say in Mikra Yotzim Midei Pshutai.
yes, but as a
Here
matter
we're
of
saying
fact,
Mikra Yotzim.
I think he didn't bother writing it because it was so pashut.
Could be.
Okay, it was so pashut. You certainly can't do it literally. Put a stumbling block. It's not going to be an issa derisa. You put a stumbling block in front of a blind person.
That's for sure going to be the right. The Rambam is only mentioning things that aren't a Pashup Shot. I hear, but it's an interesting thought. So, Frank the Gemara, V'chi Islay, Lo Yavar Mishum, Iver Lasitim Mirshol. Are you telling me that just because the guy had another animal available that he could have brought the carbon, but you sold him a better one, you're telling me there's no lifnei either? But Tanya, we learned, Amar Rab Nosson said, I'm sorry, I threw that in, but that's not necessarily true. Rab Nosson Omer, I apologize, you're right. Rab Nosson Omer, Minayin shelo yoshit Adam kois shel nazir kois shel yayin lenazir. How do you know that you shouldn't pass a kois of wine to a nazir? And as Rashi says, Shema Yavai l'shtoisoi, he might drink it. How do you know you shouldn't do that? Or ve'ever min achai livnei noyach. How do you know a guy is not allowed to eat ever min achai? How do you know you're not allowed to pass him ever min achai? Hamud loymar v'lifnei iver loy sitei nichshol. It's very interesting why the Gemara didn't say, how do you know you shouldn't pass a piece of chazer to a yid? What's up is yayin lenozir and Abram nachai to a goy. So we'll get to that in a second. Frank the Gemara, the hacha, in our case, the chilo yahavin and lay, shokla iu, even if you don't pass the wine to the nazir, you don't pass the Abram nachai to the goy, he can take it himself. Yet, the ka'avar mishum lifnei iver loy sitem mikshol. So you see, even if you're helping somebody do an Avera, which he could have done anyway, similar to our case, where I'm selling him a behema, but he had his own behema anyway, you're still going to be over. Zok to Gemara, no. You know what the case of Yoshit Adam Koishal Yain Nazir and the Abram Nachav Noach, Hachabama Yiskin and the Koi Betreya Avri Dinaharam. He couldn't have got it if you wouldn't have passed it to him. Dekonami, and I could show you that it's Meduyak that was the case. The katani lo yoshit, the lo katani lo yite. It says don't stretch out for him, don't extend it to him so that he'll be able to reach it. Normally, you say lo yite, don't give it to him. The lo yoshit tells us that it was too far for the nazir to reach, or it was too far for the goy to reach, and you enabled him. Shema mina. So the litmus test, Shmuel, which you asked is how close do you have to be? If he couldn't have possibly done the avera without you, and you enabled it, that's when you're over lifnei iver. Otherwise, you're not over lifnei iver. So in our case, it's to go ahead of a behema, I'm not over lifnei iver. Right, that's why you're not over lifnei iver. That's exactly what the Gemara is saying. You were not over lifnei iver. There's a very interesting Tosfos. Zok Tosfos. Minayin shelo yoshid adam kois l'nazir. Near Zok Tosfos, the hu adin b'chol shari surin. It's not love dafka yain l'nazir and Abram Menachai to agoy. Any yisur. Elo lahachi nachat kois yain l'nazir is mishum de mistama lemishte kaboyle. Why else is the nazir requesting a cup of wine if it's not to drink? Kiven de chula al machamer shas. Everybody, it's normal. People, what do people do with wine? They drink it. V'shemesh shokach nizirosai, and maybe this Nazir forgot that he was a Nazir, and it's the normal thing to drink wine, so we're afraid that you're enabling him to drink wine. Avol Yisrael she'amar haishit li nevela oy chazer oy shomiser. You're allowed to give it to him, even though he couldn't have reached it without you. You know why? Because ein lechoishtoi mila haishit loy. We're not choshid that he wants to eat it. Avolim yudu loy sheroitzel leachloi. Only then also lahoishit loy. V'afilu hu shaloi. Even if it belongs to the Yid himself, you're allowed to give him his own thing. So you're not allowed to give him his own thing, even though it's his. So kum techois zok toisvis, a very nice svara. A Yid you're not choshid to do nevera. So just because he's asking you to pass him a davar aser, there's no lifnei iver on you. It's only lifnei iver if there's strong reason to believe that when you're giving it to him, he's going to be over the iser. When you give the guy the Ever Minachai, he'll eat it. When you give the Nazir wine, he'll drink it because he'll forget that he was a Nazir. You might ask, well, just tell him you're a Nazir. I don't know, but a Kalpov, you're not allowed to pass it. Well, the Fiza, according to this, Osir la hoishit lemurmim lavoidz kachavim davar iser. Someone who's a mummer lavoidz kachavim, someone who is a mummer, or I guess someone who you know he will be over the iser. Ayid tizl mishumodim. So somebody who you know that he doesn't follow the halachas of the Torah, if he asks you to pass him non-kosher, you would not be allowed to. Afapi shahu shalahem, even though the non-kosher that they're asking you to pass to them belongs to him, because we know he's going to eat it. And it's also to them, the Yisrael Gomer Chashvinale. Just because they went off the derech, it doesn't absolve them of the mitzvahs. Of course, it's only usher to pass a davar usher to somebody, even though you know he's going to eat it, if he couldn't have reached it without you. I remember one of my first experiences when I joined the trade was a lot of big suppliers. They have like customer days. So you come in and they have all different vendors there that are representing their products, trying to push their products to the different contractors that come in. And of course, they have a barbecue going. So I was once by one of these places early in my career, and all of a sudden there's a guy behind me who says, Simon, Rika weg, give me a stick chazel. Nem for me a stick chazel for the grill. So the shaila is, was I allowed to pass him the stick chazel? So the fact that I know he was going to eat it, I wouldn't be allowed to pass him. But the fact that he could have got it himself, I wouldn't have been over. I didn't pass him the shtik chazel. Get not here a shtik chazel, he tells me.
By you moving away, you've been able to.
It was such a surreal moment because I was in the yeshiva room until now. Now I hear Haim Yiddish. Get not here a shtik chazel. Zog the Gemara weiter. V'ahacha. The chila yavin lo shakla iu v'kabish lo iver mishal hacha maskini the kabish over there the economic the katani lo yoshit lo katani lo ite shmamina ibaylo nasa v'nasa. We know it's also to do business with the guy 3 days before Yom Tov. But what if you did do it? Would the benefits, would the proceeds of that deal, would it be asur b'hana for you because you dealt with him that was illegal? My Rabbi Yochanan or nasa v'nasa will be asur b'hana. Whatever you bought from the guy or the money that you received from the guy is also bad. No, you're not allowed to use it. Is a mutter. There's an issue to do business with them, but that doesn't mean the proceeds would be also bad. Seems to say that it's also my love. During the 3-day added restriction period. If you did business with them, it will be usher. The brisa that says it will be usher, but no, yeah, if you did business with them on their actual day of Avoda Zara, there the Rabbanan would say that it's usher but no. But if you violated the restriction prior to the Yom Tov, that 3-day restriction would not necessarily create an Israel. Zokt Gemara. Ikadamri, Eisvei, Rab Shimon ben Lakish, Rab Yochanan. Shlagish asked to follow Kasha Rab Yochanan. Ideyan shall oivdei kechavim, the actual day of Avodah Zarah, Nasa v'Nasan Aser. So you can make a dik punkt here. Ideyan in, lifnei ideyan loy. So it's the same brisa. The question is how you analyze it. It's Masha Dafka the day of the Yom Tov itself, but not on the 3-day blackout period before. Zok Gemara, no. Tana Idi v'Idi, Ideyan Kari. The Tana, when he's referring to the entire restriction period, side the actual day of the Yom Tov, side the added 3 days of restriction, he refers to them all as Ideyan. Tana Kavasa the Rish Lakish. We do have a brisa that supports Rish Lakish that says that on that day is going to be mutter. We have a brisa to prove lakula. Kisha Amru Aser Laseis V'Laseis Imoen, when the Rabbanon prohibited doing business with the goy before Yom Tov, Lo Yasru Ella B'Davar Hamiskayim. They're only prohibiting something that's a Davar Hamiskayim. For instance, selling him something that's long lasting, not something that Rashi says like vegetables, who they're going to eat the very day that you sell it to them, they're going to eat it, and it won't even be around for the day of the Chaga. Like a vegetable loy, there's no Isser. Even something that will last several days. Nasa v'nasan b'di eved, if you did it, mutter will be mutter. So this strongly seems to support the shita of Rish Lakish. Let's have a look at the Davar Shein Miskayim. Could go in year like Astru Ela B'Davar HaMiskayim Zakrashi Ad Yoy Midayan. It's going to last. The Chazile Kamei B'Yoy Meidei V'Aslu L'Moida. If the purchase that he bought from the Yid is still there on the day of Avoda Zara, I'm so happy that the Getchke gave me an opportunity to buy this. But Davar Shein Miskayim like Yerakos, they won't even be around 2 days later. So therefore, that wouldn't be prohibited. But upon them, we have a brayso that seems to say Nasav and Nachlas Mutter. Tani Rab Zvid b'Devei Rab Oishia. Davar she'ein miskayim moichin lahem. You're allowed to sell them vegetables. Why? Because you need to unload it because it's going to go bad, right? If you sell produce, you need to sell it quickly, and they're not going to have it anyway on their day of the Yom Tov because it's going to get used up. You're not allowed to buy it from them because you're also giving them an opportunity to thank their Getchke that they were able to sell out all of their perishable schayr. As Rashi says, in Leichem the Marvikla, you're really helping the guy. So we don't want to help them say, Lakubit the Getchke, my Getchke helped me deplete all of my perishable inventory. Hahumino, there was a min, a apikoris. The Shader le dinra kisrino le Rabbi Yehuda Nesia b'yomeidai. He sent a newly minted fresh coin on as a gift to Rabbi Yehuda Nesia on the day of the Getchke. So the question is, was he allowed to accept that gift? Have Yosef Rish Lakish kamei. Rish Lakish was sitting in front of Rabbi Yehuda Nesia when he received this coin. Amar, and he said, Rabbi Yehuda asked Rish Lakish, Heichi Evet, what am I supposed to do? Eshkele, if I accept the gift, Azalu Moida. This guy is going to say, my Gavaltika Getchke, in his chus, that he accepted the gift. Lo Yashkele, and if I don't accept it, Havela Eva. It's going to create bad vibes between me and the Memshala. It's not a good situation. Amar Rish Lakish, I'll tell you what you should do. Toil uzroik oiser lebar b'fanav. Take it and throw it into the garbage. So he says, "I'm close again, Tafel Eva." That's going to cause a bigger problem. Taking this and throw it into the garbage. Stand over a storm drain. When he passes you, you go, "Oops! It went down the storm drain. My loss." So he won't have a know that you received anything from him, but it won't cause Eva. It'll just look like you were a little bit clumsy. So when you're buying or selling to them, that's when there's a discussion of a harvacha or lifnei iver. But borrowing from them, there's for sure no lifnei iver there. So what is the situation? I understand why you're not allowed to lend something to them. The kamarvachu, you're giving him something that they wouldn't otherwise have. So on the day of the Getchke, you'll say, thank you, Getchke, that you allowed me this opportunity that I was able to borrow this wonderful keli from the Yid. Borrowing from them, you're taking away from them. Why in the world should that be a problem? We're afraid that if you lend to them, if you borrow from them, you might lend to them. Rav Amar, no, even when the guy lends you something, he has a no. Look, the Yid has to come on to me. I'm powerful. I'm successful. that's also something that you don't want to give them. Lahalvoisim v'lavish mehem. I'm sorry. No, say thank you, Getchke, that I'm such a success. You made me so successful that I'm able to lend out my kalim. So tomorrow, what about lahalvoisim v'lavish mehem with money? Bishtem lahalvoisim, why you can't lend them money? We should become arbaklu. El lavish mehem. Am I? Why can't you borrow from them? I'm Rabbi, the same svara as before. Zara lahalvoisim mehem otu lahalvoisim. If you borrow from them, then you might lend them. Rav Amar no, klum mishum da'azal l'moidahu. The guys will say, thank you, Geshke, for making me so wealthy that I'm able to lend out money. Lepayr on the lepayr man. Frank, the same question. Bishlam lepayr, I understand why you can't pay them back. Mishum the kamar b'chlu. They're getting their money back. El lefroy man, fakert memutim amaytlu. Am Rabbi yegzer lefroy man, otu lefroy Rav. Rav Amar no, kulam mishum da'azal l'moidahu. He's saying, thank you, Geshke, that I was able to pay back. Utrichi. And we need the Mishnah to tell us in all these three cases that it's usher. Why? The Itana losses for losses iman. That's Mishum the Kamarvakhu, since they're benefiting, Azulumoida, Avolishal Mahen, but borrowing from them. The Ma'utikamatlu, Shabadom, I would have thought that's mutter. Vitana Lishal Mahen, and if the Torah said that you're not allowed to borrow from them, Mishum the Chashiva Milsa, the Azulumoida, he'll feel good that he was wealthy and he's able to lend out his kalim. But when he lends you money, he only has concern. Amar tu v'loy hadrezuzei. What if they don't pay me back? The eternal lavishman, and if it only says lavishman, mishum de Amar bal korchay mifrana. I'm not worried about getting paid back. I have a star. I'll take it to court. I'll be able to get that money out of it. But right now he'll be happy that he's able to have money to lend. But to get paid back from them. In other words, to receive payment from them, the Sulei Hadrizuze, that money is never going to go back to the guy. So therefore you're allowed to accept that Pirayim from him, from Mashmalon, Shricha, that's needed as well. So every tzad needed the Mishnah to tell us. Rabbi Yehuda in the Freim hand, Rabbi Yehuda holds you allowed to accept payment from them because nobody likes paying, so it hurts him. Frank Gemara, last day Rabbi Yehuda, Aval Bishametzer Achshav. Right, we have the second sheet in the Mishnah that said that you're not allowed to accept payment from them because even though it's painful to pay, but at the end of the day, it feels good to have reduced your debt. Whose shita was that? Amrullah, the Chacham told him, so does Rabbi Yehuda not agree to that svara? I'll show you that he does. But Tanya, in another instance, you see Rabbi Yehuda said, no, people do think ahead and have simcha because of a future benefit. It's mamish, we're talking about dieting. That is the side of a diet. A woman is not allowed to sit on her face because it's a treatment that makes her have nice soft skin. But she's not allowed to do it on moyed, while the sit is on her, it's not nice. She's making herself ugly. She's doing it because after Yom Tov, after the treatment, she'll have nice skin. You can't do that. But if she's gonna benefit from the results already on Yom Tov, she could take it off before the end of Yom Tov and benefit on Yom Tov from this treatment. Even though right now when she puts it on, it's not nice and not comfortable, but simcha hi la'achar zman, and therefore it would be mutter. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda says you do look at the long game. So if you look at the long game, so how come Rabbi Yehuda over here says that it's a tzar for the guy to pay back? You look at the long game. You look at simcha la'achar zman. Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak, don't bring me a raya from Hilchos Cholamoid, from Hilchos Yom Tov. Hanach l'Hilchos Moed. The kulu, every case of Cholamoid is meitzer achshav simcha la'achar zman. That's what every shaila of what you're allowed to do cooking. Cooking is major action. It's not geschmack to stand in the kitchen and cook, but we're matter it. Why? Because you're going to enjoy the food later. So when it comes to Yom Tov, there it's different. That if there's a simcha la'achar zman, it's going to be mutter, but you cannot apply that to these halachas over here. Ravina Amar Ovid kechavim le'inyin peroyin la'oila meitzer. Maybe Rabbi knows that no. When it comes to peroyin, a guy always has tsar. And therefore, for a guy to pay back, he's never happy to have him pay back. Maybe he was hoping to have been able to avoid payment. Like supposedly I heard that whoever Khomeini owed big money to, he appointed him as the next general because then he knew that he wouldn't have to pay back.
So,
That's right. Sagt Gemara weiter. Mas listen, the loy Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Our Mishnah will not be consistent with Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. The Tanya Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Omer, Malva b'shtar or Milva b'shtar, ein nefroid mehen. If it's a Milva b'shtar, you're not allowed to demand payment from a goy in these 3 days before their getchka. Why? Because you're helping them pay you back. They'll be happy, and you don't want to give them that anah. And there's no risk that you won't be able to collect later because you have a star. But milva al peh, if you don't have a star, so there's a chance that the goy won't want to pay. You're allowed to chap any opportunity to get him to pay you nefroy mehen. Why? Bepneishu kamatzel miyado. So why are we saying our mission is not like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha? Zok Rashi. L'fnei yidein if they should sameach ulach man b'yameidai. The kiyum the naked shtara Yisraeli luya, since the Yisrael is a star, kol shaitim is stuffing. So Rabbi Shua ben Karcha makes that distinction between what type of halva it was. Our Mishnah doesn't make that type of distinction. Our Mishnah seems to prohibit getting paid back, even if it's a milva. Yosef Rabbi Yosef achayer to Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Yosef was sitting behind Rabbi Abba, and they were both sitting in front of their Rebbe. The Yosef Rabbi Abba kamed Rav Huna. So Rav Huna was the one saying the shir, and Rabbi Yosef was behind Rabbi Abba in the shir. The Yosef Amar, and what was said? Hilchazak Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. We pass like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha that you're allowed to be teveya and you're allowed to receive payment for a milva al peh, even though it's l'fnei yidayin. The Hilchazak Rabbi Yehuda, and the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah said that you're allowed to take back a choiv because it's meitzar loy. Because it hurts the guy to have to pay back. Rabbi Shua Amar. We said just now, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said that you're allowed to collect a milva peh. Rabbi Yehuda the Tanya. Which Rabbi Yehuda is it? Oh, so it's not Rabbi Yehuda from Mishnah. It's a different Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, hanoisen semer letzeva. You have white wool and you want it dyed red. So you give it in to a company that dyes wool. And you wanted them to dye it red. That was the deal. You said, I'm going to pay you $5, you'll dye it red for me. And the company that dyed it made a mistake. They dyed it black. Or shachar v'tzavayada. So they didn't do what they were supposed to. So Zok Meir says nois and loy the mate simray. The uman that was paisheya gets to be koina. He's koina with shinui. He's koina the wool that you gave him, and therefore he has to pay you back the value of the wool that you gave him, and then you're going to have to go to somebody else to get it dyed. Rabbi Yehuda no. Why would the uman get that benefit? Now he got himself with very little investment. He was able to get himself dyed wool. So that's not what you do. Rather, he has to lose them. So ima shvach yeser ala yitzia. Let's say it costed $5 to buy the ingredients and to put the labor in to dye this wool. If it costed $5, but the wool is worth an extra $20, then nois and nois yitzia. Then the owner of the wool gets to keep the red wool, benefit from the $20 inflation of the value of his product, but he only has to pay $5 for it. But vima yitzia yiseira lashvach. But what if it costed $20 and is only worth $5 more? Then noisen loyes lashvach. The owner can keep that black wool, that wrongfully dyed wool, and only pay what its increased value is, and not the expenses of the issue. And this is where we're passing like Rabbi Yehuda that we sanction, sort of to speak, the uman. Okay, we'll stop here. I'll be mamshach tomorrow.